All right, section 5-5. This is adding and subtracting like fractions. Example 1, find each sum. This is writing in simplest form. So again, anytime we add or subtract fractions, we should all know this from last year that we have to have common denominators, or like fractions, like the title says. So when that happens, we have common denominators here, so the denominator just continues to go across. But what we do is we end up doing the top here. So the top says 3 plus 5, which is 8. And then we're going to try to simplify. Well, that is simplified for us, but there's also another version here. We got to do bottom into top. If you do bottom into top, 7 goes into that once, with a remainder of 1 from there, and then over 7. So the answer ends up being 1 1/7, or 8 over 7. Now on the bottom, we've done this before, right? What happens when we see plus negative? I hope you think scribble out the plus sign. So now what this says is 5 over 8. Now this minus, or this negative sign, becomes the minus sign. And then you just write 7 over 8. All right, I know that might be tricky for some of you, but a negative is a minus. It's just how you read it. And so now we have 5 over 8 minus 7 over 8. Again, the bottom number just continues to go across. Now this says 5 minus 7, which, going back in our notes, would be right 5, then left 7. We end at -2, and then we simplify, right? So dividing the top and bottom by 2 gives us -1/4. And that's the only answer for that. Now example 2, 6 5/8 plus 1 1/8. Since this is all addition and it's all positive, you're allowed to do a couple shortcuts here. So the shortcut would be you can actually add those together and get 7. And then we're going to do these two together, 5/8. We're going to do this separately. Plus 1/8. We already have common denominators, so you just add or do whatever it says on top. And that is 6. And then we're going to simplify those. They're both divisible by 2. So we get 3 and 4, and then that goes up there. So we end up with 7 3/4 here. Now, if you don't have that shortcut method, anytime there's negatives or minuses, that's not a great time to use it, although I know that I'm able to do a couple shortcuts on those. You might be too, but if you're nervous about getting a wrong answer, you can always go back to the C method. All right? 6 times 8 is 48, plus 5 is 53 over 8, and then we're adding 8 times 1 plus 1 is 9 over 8. So all I did was take those mixed numbers and make them improper fractions. Bottom numbers are the same. 53 plus 9 is 62. And then what we end up doing is simplifying this. All right, so we end up getting 31 over 4. And then as you guys know, bottom into top, 4 goes into 31 7 times with remainder of 3, because 7 times 4 is 28. 28 to 31 is 3. So you end up with a remainder 3 over 4. So these are the same numbers, mixed number or improper fraction. Now example 3, we've got find 9 over 20 minus 13 over 20. Again, we have common denominators here, so the answer ends up being the same bottom number. That makes it a little bit easier. And then I'm also going to do the top. All right, so the top says 9 minus 13, and hopefully you think -4. But if you don't, then what you should be thinking is that's a positive 9, right 9, minus 13 means go left 13, and you end up at -4. Now what we're doing is simplifying this, 4 and 20. I know that 4 goes into both of those, so I'm going to simplify. -4 over divided by 4 is -1, and 20 divided by 4 is 5. So the answer is -1/5. Example 4 here says to evaluate a minus b. A is 9 and 1/6, and B is 5 and 2/6. So all we're going to do is plug those in first of all. We got 9 and 1/6, minus sign drops down, and then we've got B, 5 and 2/6. Now there is some shortcuts you could use here, but I'm nervous to show you that. So I think the best method here is to do the C method. That way will work every time. So 6 times 9 is 54 plus 1 is 55 over 6, and then we're subtracting this one. 6 times 5 is 30 plus 2 is 32 over 6. That same bottom number 6 goes on the bottom of those fractions also. Bottom numbers are the same, so that makes it easy. And now we just do the top. 55 minus 32 is 23. Then we got to simplify, and for this it is simplified, so 23 over 6 is an answer, but we can still change that to a mixed number. So bottom into top, 6 goes into 23 3 times. 6 times 3 is 18, so the remainder from 18 to 23 is 5. So that's kind of a quick way you can do it in your head. Again, same bottom number 6 goes to the bottom number here, also 6. So both of those are correct. Example 5, last one here on page 252. This is n over 8 plus 5n over 8. Write the sum in simplest form. So now we're adding some algebra here, obviously. We've got numbers and letters going on. And since we have like fractions, we know that the bottom number will stay 8 here. Alright, but what we end up having to do here is the top. Now, this is something that we should or could know a little bit about. We are combining like terms here. We have n plus 5n, and if you don't see a number in front of a letter, there is a 1 there. So you notice I just wrote that down. There's not 0 n's. If there were 0 n's, there wouldn't be any n's there. So if you see an n and there's no number, then you have 1 n. And 1 n plus 5 n, if you have 1 ninja and you add 5 ninjas, you now have 6 ninjas. So we would write 6n. Alright, so now we have 6n over 8, and we're going to simplify that. 6n over 8. What goes into 6 and 8? 2 does. 6 divided by 2 is 3. The n stays there. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So that is one answer. Now we can write this several ways. 3n over 4, we can also write this as 3/4 n, with the n right beside the fraction, not on bottom. The fraction, or the n is on top of the fraction, or you can write it right beside it. That's just two different ways to write that you'll see as we go on through the year.